Welcome to the Future Finance Show, where we talk about
the top 10 reasons we hate paper ledgers.
If you spend 70 hours a month, download all of the Excel CSVs from the data sources that we care about, yes, you're wasting 70 hours a month due to lack of automation and all of the manual work. The level of reliability and accuracy at that point then becomes a challenge.
How do you strike that balance between a CFO who wants their team to be more data savvy, but they have the limited resources?
It's simply just a manual process that takes up too many resources. Focus on how to drive revenue for their business with existing data. The best way is to find a couple of champions within that group that have an appetite for trialing some form of automation. You can look out into the tech world and there's a lot of people doing exciting things. You need to stay grounded with what the real challenges are and not just follow the trends. So what I'm trying to do with AI is not replace business functions in any way. It's let business domain experts.
Future Finance is brought to you by QFlow.ai, the strategic finance platform solving the toughest part of planning and analysis. B2B revenue aligns sales, marketing, and finance seamlessly. Speed up decision-making and lock in accountability with QFlow.ai.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Future Finance. Glenn and I are going to talk about some of the things we've seen over the last few weeks since our last episode, some exciting news announcements. But we're going to start with a little bit of fun here. Some of you may have seen this on my LinkedIn feed, but a guy by the name of Duke Enager, he put a post out saying he asked AI, based on everything it knew about him, to create a picture of him. And it came up with this very professional picture, but it had a pink shirt. He's like, and the pink is from my daughter using AI. That's how he described it. So I'm going to show you, for those who watch it on video, I'm going to show you what mine looks like and we're going to have Glenn do it live here in a minute. If you listen to the audio, you might want to switch over to the video for this part. Might be a little hard, but we'll do our best to describe it. So you ready for me to share what I look like, Glenn?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, all right. Certainly they're going to capture the beard.
We shall see. So Glenn, can you see the screen there?
That's not you, Paul.
What, the ferret and the stuffed animals and the all girl colors? Is it me and the brown curly hair?
You're not the only one using your chat GPT, I would imagine.
My daughter probably uses it, 4 hours a day. I use it half an hour. So you can see who it picked up. But what gets better is let's have a little fun with a couple of the comments while we're at it. So a few people did it. Mark Proctor, and his comment was, I hate the image because it has me using a Mac. And I hate Mac. You can't use Excel on a Mac because he's an Excel guy. Not to mention, didn't worry about the fact that he has a finger in front that's detached with two fingernails and 12 fingers. Say, I don't care about that. It's the Mac that's the problem.
Well, is he left-handed? Because the mouse is positioned for a left-handed user. It would be interesting if it did actually pick that up.
That's a good question. I don't know. Let's ask him right now. We won't get the answer today, but we'll just put it in the chat here real quick.
While you're doing that, is there anything from you that appeared in that picture, or is it all your daughter's stuff?
Let me go back and look again. I didn't see anything, but we'll do one more time. Mouse is for a left-handed person. Are you left-handed? And we'll just see what he says. All right, reply. So let's go back and look at my picture one more time. Not really. Because I do use mine daily just about, but she has to be 95% used. If I let her, she'd literally spend 12 hours a day on my account. And I'm not exaggerating.
It's pretty funny looking at how awesome would it be if there was one financial chart in the background on the wall amidst the pictures of the ferrets.
I know, and that's what I'm trying to see, and I'm just not. I'm looking really close at the moment, and I'm not seeing it. I would love that. If on the left-hand side, all of a sudden there was Excel, right, or a chart, or a podcast mic, or something that describes me. I think one of the challenges is when it comes to podcasts, I do all my transcripts with Claude AI, right? I use both. I do use ChatGPT quite a bit for finance stuff, more course building and things like that. But at last, nothing but the comments are great before we do yours. I love the couple of these. Someone said, at least the hair color matches. The response was, yeah, it's the right length, but the wrong location. And then someone shared, theirs. He's like, a slimmer me. And then if you move much of the hair from top to bottom of head, it might be a better likeness. Not so sure about that background, though. And someone else, if only they gave her a beard. So you can see a theme there. I love your room, Paul. Looks cute. So then, all right, it's your turn to share, Glenn. I'm going to stop sharing. Going live, you're going to ask it.
Yeah. All right. So let me present, share screen.
We'll see if you really do as much AI stuff as you talk, or is Han Solo going to come up?
Yeah. All right. So I am now sharing my screen. You seeing that?
Yep. What he shared on LinkedIn. This is the exact prompt I used. So it was, 1 second, almost got it. I said, from all that you know about me, create an image of me. And I did put it straight in ChatGPT, but Dolly's what they use. So.
Yep. So we do have to go back to GPT.
Yeah, go to GPT and do it. That's where I did mine. See, we're learning on the fly. These are the things that you guys need to know as finance professionals. Right, Glenn? I mean, forget the charts and Excel and all that stuff. It's about having a little bit of fun with the
So from all that you know about me, create
an image of me.
So it's interesting that Dolly doesn't carry over because this does have a memory. I'm sort of scared to see what the memory is going to be.
Yeah, that's why we want, the memory. We now know it doesn't carry over to Dolly. That's why I was wondering, will it carry over? My daughter gives it, ask ChatGPT so much stuff, I have to dump the memory pretty often. That tells you how often she uses it. And I'm on a paid account, so not the 300 or whatever we'll talk about in a few minutes. Okay. Not bad.
Yeah. It's
You have a little bit of gray in your hair.
much stronger chin than I have.
Yeah, and you're a little more clean shaven. You got a little bit more of that beard, a little bit of that shadow going in yourself, a little bit of a beard.
Quite the coif to do, though.
I like how it has a lot of AI and a graph. It makes it clear that you're kind of an AI guy. But notice, once again, the computer looks like a Mac.
Yep. And I'm a Mac guy.
You are a Mac guy. Okay, so got that right. I was wondering if it's more just kind of, it does that deliberately.
I haven't put any pictures of myself or my office in there. I'm not in my office today, but those bookshelves back there are kind of similar to the ones that are in my real office.
You have a little bit of a brick in your office that's darker, but this kind of has the brick older feel, a little bit like your office.
Yeah, I don't know how it would have that. I don't know. This
Totally could be the random, but
yeah, or it could be really scary that we don't realize how much these AI things know about us.
Well, it's like perfectly, like if you can see my picture, right? There's like no bend in it. It's like this perfect model hand, although the veins, those are some massive veins. If you
I don't think I have that vascularity.
Is his blood flowing so quickly he's getting ready to have a heart attack? His blood pressure's a little high.
Oh, you know what I was thinking of is Stranger Things season, whatever it was, 4, when Billy was possessed by the thing and you could see all the veins coming out. That's what I look like, the guy, the bad kid from Stranger Things. Or they?
All right. Well, that was a fun thought experiment. One other fun thought experiment I saw this week, and then we'll get into the 12 days of shipments. All right. So I went to Vegas, was there all week for the Financial Modeling World Cup, televised on ESPN. They had the College World Championships. We had a group of students that came from Madagascar to compete. It's really cool. I mean, just people all over the world, 3-time champion in Excel esports. Other guys that have won it. One that had won it twice, another one that had won it once. And there was what they call the splash chance qualification round. So there were a certain number of people that already made it through. And then they selected another 40-something people for the first night of the event in the arena to narrow it down. And over time, they narrowed it down until they got to one. And so the case we had was like Axel the elf, the Christmas elf. And there was this list of people, and you had to help find out who was naughty and nice, which states had the most toys, which state only had one toy because it had been recalled. And all the other states had recalled it, but they had. And it got harder and harder. Toward the end, it got into, you got to figure out how many trips Santa has to take because he has to refill his bag. It's not big enough to take all the toys. So you start from super easy all the way through. So 7 levels, 5 bonus questions. Max score of like 1,250 points or something like that. And David 14, who created the actual case for the finals, did a presentation where he showed, I took the case after it came out, and I went with Copilot and tried to see what I could solve. So he had the case, and he started asking Copilot, okay, based on my data. First one was like, tell me the top states for toys, or find me what toys so-and-so gets based on the list. How many kids are naughty? And he solved the first 3 levels with Copilot all the way through and showed it. And to give reference, I almost never practiced, but for example, I'd only solved the first 3 levels. I didn't finish level 4 in the 30 minutes. I finished 4 bonus questions, which he didn't do any of those. So frankly, it was about a little over 100 points off me. So it would have been toward the bottom of competitors, but it was still crazy to see that, hey, you can just start asking Copilot, they can start solving these things.
I mean, this goes right to our this segment we did for months on will AI take your job? And that's kind of a live example of, well, this got pretty good for, think about you where you are, and then the people, big competitors there, but then think about vast majority of Excel users who wouldn't come anywhere near that. And if you have Copilot already coming to that level, I mean, that's pretty fast and pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would say, at least 50% of the people out there, it can do what they can do, if not more. And in many cases, I'd say more. Like one guy even showed answering it Python, and it wrote the Python for something, right? Because the new Copilot, that's one of the emphasis is Python. I said when they came out with Python, they came out with it when they did, because it's a perfect match for Copilot in Accept, but it will make things a lot easier and make almost anyone into a basic coder, not a advanced coder by any means. We've had that discussion, but so that was fun to see. The other that was fun is the final case. Were you a video game player ever?
When I was a video game player in about 1980, I was the master of the Atari 2600. Since then, the games got way too complex. Once we went from the single joystick controller with one button, I was out.
You know how old I was in 1980?
4. Okay, all right.
So, our first video game ever was, that I remember from Radio Shack, we had Pong. I remember we had one big paddle and one little paddle, and you could play on the screen and do Pong. That's the first video game I remember. Then we had Magnavox, Odyssey 64, and we bought the voice thing that went on top of it. It was a big, huge keyboard, and you could play games. All right, so one other thing from the competition, I was going to say, the final game for all your fun is they made him solve a case of World of Warcraft. The other one that was fascinating is isolatops. So he rotated the grid in Excel, and it had all its own grid numbering. So it was a diamond at a 45-degree angle, and you had to find the answers out of the grid, but Excel's only going to understand the regular grid. So you had to convert everything. So they're there trying to look at this thing thinking, I got to solve cases with this diamond grid that's at a 45-degree angle where C25 might be equivalent to B6 in the grid, right? So you kind of have to match it all out. And one guy literally went like this as the competition you guys started when he first saw it, tilted his head to go, hey, well, that worked to see this normal.
Wow. So what was the mood there? I mean, with all these, world-class modelers seeing how AI is catching up, was there fear, or was there sort of a pride in, sort of like before AI, became the best chess player in the world or the best Go player in the world? It's like, and now it's coming for Excel.
I don't think there was any fear of that. I think these guys at this point just looked at it. Okay, it's coming. We need to learn it. But, amazingly enough, they were all there, almost all of one, to have fun and compete, but to teach others. I've never seen a community like this where, yes, they're competitive, but to a T, every single one is friends first. Really interesting group. Was super impressed with that. I didn't get the sense from any of them of real concern. I mean, I asked a few, I talked to a guy who won the whole thing, and AI will build the models for us. He's like, yes, but you'll still need human judgment.
Yep.
there's still going to always be some level of human judgment to interpret, at least in the near term. When it gets to the point where that's not needed, well, goodbye humans, I guess, right? Then it's where we start being really nice to our robot overlords.
You have some other content coming out of that too? Is that you'll save that
Yeah,
announcement
I'll
for a
have
later
two
day?
podcast episodes I'm going to do on Financial Modelers Corner. Like I said, I interviewed David Fortine, who created the case, Michael Yarman, who run the whole competition, Andrew Grigornovich, who's the founder of the entire organization, and some others that I interviewed. Plus, I'll be doing some episodes with people I met there. So there'll be quite a bit on my Financial Modelers Corner podcast in the future. One other fun thing. So one of the guys used Sumo. Are you familiar with the Sumo app?
No.
Have you heard of that? So Sumo will create music for you.
Oh,
come up with the lyrics.
that one. Yeah. Sorry, these names I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
I thought you did, but I get it. So Giles Mel is his name. He is an Excel MVP, and he created a song for the competition. He wrote all the lyrics and ran it through Sumo and had it created, did a few different versions. And one of them was really catchy. It came out really good to the point where Microsoft liked it enough that they were playing it in the arena half the night. And up on the screen and used it for the event. So that tells you, hey, should we be worried a little bit? Right? Usually that would always be a musician doing all that. And yes, he created the lyrics, but then he just used an online app to do the rest of it. It's a far cry from someone sitting with a mixer and instruments and all that stuff to do the background of how it's traditionally done.
Well, very cool.
You brought this up. I've been in a cave the last week in Vegas, so I didn't know what was going on in the world. I'm finally coming out today. But you were mentioning something called Shipmas. I want to call it something else, but I'll call it Shipment. I think it's a play on Christmas. Tell us about Shipmas.
I'm not going to say that.
You're afraid you're going to say something else.
And OpenAI is terrible at naming things. However, what this is 12 days of releases and pretty cool announcements from OpenAI. They led with a pretty big one on day one, which was, so we've all been playing around with O1 preview for, since September now. And, honestly, it's kind of hard to find use cases for most of what we do, especially because it wasn't multimodal. You couldn't do attachments with it, no images, and it was just text. They have now released O1 full, and they showed some benchmarks of the full version of O1 versus preview, and kind of across the board, O1 was better. It's better at deciding how long to think about something and when to spend more resources versus less. And so basically you're getting more compute in about half the time when you use O1 now. Now, interestingly, O1 is not as good as 4.0 or as good as Claude at coding, but you have to know how to use these models. And what I think is going to happen ultimately is the chatbot will decide which model to use. You won't have to do this toggle back and forth.
Yeah, it'll be part of the workflow type thing of you'll feed in what you need. It may try all of them, and there may even be a model that reviews it and says, here's the best answer at some point. But it will send it where it thinks makes sense, or to two models or whatever.
My typical go-to sort of parlor trick with ChatGPT is to analyze financial statements and get ChatGPT data analysts to give us feedback and do an assessment of a company, but essentially to give us its opinion on the company, the financial health of a company, and help, say what are some strategies that we could use to improve performance. But historically, that takes a lot of back and forth and sort of chain of thought prompting. But I'm wondering, what I'd really like to see is if I upload my 3 years of financial statements and then in a single prompt, tell it something like, you're the CEO of this company. We need to come up with our 3-year plan or 3 to 5 year plan, what we're going to do with the company based on these financials. How would you improve our, financial health, or whatever, something like that. That's what I want to see, because a lot of the work that you and I do, it's, if you wanted to come up with some kind of strategy based on research or what, you could do it, but not being able to attach your own data or to search the web or use any kind of tools, it was sort of limited what it can do. So it's going to be very cool to see what O1 full does. And I think this weekend I'm going to geek out on it some.
At least you're showing your geek side. I mean, I spent a week in Vegas looking at Excel spreadsheets instead of gambling and drinking. I don't gamble and drink. A lot did both, but just the fact that, right, we went to Vegas for a spreadsheet shows how big of a geek we are. So you're showing your weekend geekness.
I don't know. I think our audience relates to us, though. It's fine. They wouldn't. I mean, they're confessing that they're geeks by the time they commit to hit play on this podcast. So
Yeah, and if they get this far, we know for sure they're.
I guess the only other thing I'll say about the release yesterday was I haven't pulled the trigger on this, and I have subscriptions for if you name an AI service from Gemini to Midjourney to.
All right, let's label how many you have a subscription for. So first, we could ask our audience, if you're listening, take a guess, what the right number is, and let us know if you win. So I'm going to let you guess first. How many do you think AI subscriptions, so kind of LLM, that truly dedicated AI tools, how many subscriptions do you think I paid for?
I bet it's just two. I bet it's Claude and GPT.
Nope. 3. Claude, GPT, Copilot.
Yep. Okay.
And I do use the AI and a tool called ClickUp, but it's not, I just use it in the tool, right? And other tools, but they're not dedicated AIs. How many do you have? And you can count something like Sumo or things that are a dedicated application, Midjourney. So we don't have to just be the traditional LLM model. I'm going to guess you have ChatGPT for sure. I'm going to try to guess. You have Claude, you have Copilot, you have Midjourney, and you have to have 1 or 2 others. I'm going 6 is my guess. I don't know what the other 2 are, but I'm guessing 6.
So let's see. Gamma is a presentation creator. It's gamma.app, I think is their URL.
And you have a paid version of it.
Yep. Midjourney for images. Did you already say that one?
I did say Midjourney.
Let's see. Gemini. I pay for Gemini. As much as I dog Gemini, because I want to see Copilot. So when Gemini...
You're doing it for comparison purposes.
Yes, because what I want to see with Gemini is, so right now I can have it summarize emails. It does pretty good at that. So it's integrated in because I use Google Docs and all that. So
Sure.
I want to see how Google is handling the sort of
platform and the different applications, how they're really integrating it into workflow. Because that's the area we need as finance, is that workflow integration.
Exactly. So I don't use, that's probably the one I use the least. And honestly, I understand that Anthropic is doing cool things, but Claude has really been letting me down. They're bogged down lately because they've, the computer use, and they've done some cool stuff. So they're abbreviating their responses. It's down. It hasn't been doing the, one of my favorite things to do would be to upload a 10K and financial statements and just tell
I haven't used
without
it
a lot
much
of prompting,
lately.
build me a dashboard. And it was building these cool React dashboards. It's not doing that anymore. It'll break down. It doesn't have, and I've got, that's on the paid version. So Claude's letting me down a little bit. I don't pay for Grok, XAI and all that. I just, that the whole Twitter mess, I'm just, I'll skip that. But
yeah. So one other on that. That's what I was just going to get to. So they announced their Pro. What's that going to run a month?
So $200 a month. So think about
that. Get into my wallet.
Yeah, that one feels a little painful, but
what are you getting for the $200? What's the selling point that says I should pay $200 instead of $20?
It is a tenfold increase, but the idea is, and we'll see, because I think what's going to happen is with this O1 full, you're going to be even on so I'm on the team, the OpenAI team account, which is, everyone who works with me can use this account, and we're, have the protected non-training. So that's $30 a user per month.
Well, let's just think that the average, let's go consulting for a minute, right? The average consulting rate is probably low end $100 for some basic stuff, up to, big, huge firms. Let's just say 500. Yes, there's people that charge more, but I think that's a fair range. You say 1 to 6. So let's just say you're in the middle, you're charging 300, right? Just ballpark. You need an hour and a half of efficiency.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, I know I get that. I would imagine I get more than that in a week.
So from an economic standpoint, ignore the emotional of that's $200. Economically, you're better off paying it.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
And I think anyone who's a power user, I'm not going to, I could argue, and again, it would be a write-off. I'm not going to pay for it until I start hitting limits. Now, I'll be
of course, until you actually feel like you have to have it, why pay for it?
Yeah.
Again, you're behaving rationally.
Fair
Even
point.
finance people, there's plenty of irrational. There's a reason there's behavioral economics.
Thinking fast, thinking slow. We already talked about that with O1 and longer.
We did. It'll be fascinating to watch, right? What people are willing to pay, how they think about it, where the limit is. as we go on and on with AI. But we've got almost 30 minutes. Maybe we'll call here a moment unless you have any other fun AI.
So I just want to see how much better at ChatGPT your daughter is going to get when you upgrade to that pro plan.
I'm going to have to with how much she uses it, which reminded me of one other thing. It's a lot like if anyone's used Python in Excel, they give you a certain amount of pro computational because it's all off server. Everything for Python is calculated in the cloud and sent back to your machine, the code. So it's all on the server, and you only get so much, and then it goes to ordinary speed. It runs slower, or you can pay to keep it higher. And so it'll be interesting. That's what we're seeing with a lot of these token, right? That's kind of the AI approach is, hey, there's so much bandwidth you get free, so many tokens, time, whatever you want to call it, prompts, which are proxies. And so I would imagine there'll be just some changes in the economics, and if you hit some limit, you're going to want the pro plan. For her, I just let her go to a lesser one. I'm like, tough luck. The worst is when I want to use that version, I need it for something, she's used all of mine. I'm like, you're blocked out till 5 p.m. today.
You're a good dad. You're a good dad.
She has fun. She's using my phone right now, speaking of phones. So I will probably be a girl forever, according to ChatGPT. Now, what I need is the girl with the beard. We'll see if we can get that for the next one. Welcome to another episode of Future Finance. I have here with me my co-host, Glenn Hopper, and we have Gabi Steele here with us today that's going to be our guest. Gabi is a distinguished data visualization expert and entrepreneur. She has co-founded Data Culture and Preql. Data Culture is a company dedicated to empowering organizations through data-driven decision-making. Preql is an enterprise AI-powered metrics platform that recently raised $7 million as a seed round. Gabi's expertise lies in transforming complex data into accessible visual narratives, enabling businesses to harness the full potential of their information. Her innovative approach has earned her recognition in the data visualization community, and she continues to lead initiatives that bridge the gap between data science and practical application. So, Gabi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here and get to talk a little bit about what you're doing and the finance world. And so I want to start with this question. I noticed you earned your undergrad in graphic design, but you pretty quickly gravitated more toward the data analytics, the engineering, the visualization. Kind of what attracted you to that area versus graphic design?
Yeah, so I share this story often, though I did do my undergrad a while ago. I look younger than I am. But basically, I entered the space. I studied painting and drawing initially, and then came to this kind of creative world and was doing a lot of designs for websites and for different fashion retailers, and realized that there was just a really clear wall or ceiling or limit when it came to what you could do without some sort of engineering component. You were designing things you couldn't build. So that drew me closer to doing some front end work. And then data is really appealing for anybody who has curiosity around how businesses function, how things really work. And it just started to seep into everything I touched. So I was at Parsons School of Design, where I did a master's degree in data visualization, in a moment where a lot of folks were starting to think about, how do you make data more accessible to broad audiences? What is this? Is it its own discipline? So some of that was timing. A lot of it was curiosity. And my current co-founder, Leah Weiss, and I, who's also the co-founder of Data Culture, and we've been working together for 7+ years, we both came to the engineering space post kind of like initial graduate or undergraduate degrees. And I think that helped us be really empathetic to audiences that didn't quite know how to write code, how to write SQL, but wanted answers. So that's been an ethos from the beginning. And then I was fortunate that I got to work at the Washington Post during the 2016 election, where I did a lot of data visualization and storytelling work. And here we are.
Yeah, I think what I saw you tell a little bit of that story was something when you were at the Washington Post. I saw something, I think, on YouTube or somewhere. I was kind of trying to do my homework, and you shared a little bit of that transition. So every so often I do, occasionally.
I'm allowed to ask questions, but what did you both study in undergrad? Was that an option? Like, just thinking about how you got here? Like, what brought us all to this room?
So I did business management with an entrepreneurship specialization and a minor in political science.
Okay, and you're an FP&A guy now.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was on the 7-year undergrad plan. From that, what is it from Tommy Boy, where he said, yeah, a lot of people go to school for 7 years. They're called doctor. I didn't. I switched majors 4 times. I went from mechanical engineering, hated it, switched to philosophy, and then someone told me I couldn't get a job with philosophy, so I went English lit, which still couldn't get a job. So then I went journalism. Then I became a journalist, and then I got married and realized I wasn't going to make enough money as a journalist. So I went and got my MBA. Then I later got a master's in finance and a grad certificate in analytics. Terrible at visualizations, though. Colorblind. I'm no Edward Tufte, but I bet you do some badass visualization with that graphic design for undergrad, and then with the master's focus. That's yeah. I mean, and that's such an important thing to be able to express that your ideas visually, because I can table and chart and use the basic stuff, but there's a real art that I think a lot of people don't realize for data visualization.
Yeah, I mean, a few things. One of them is we talk a lot about accessibility and making sure that your visualizations and even just web design and for our company stuff, you can be colorblind and you can still interpret information. And I also talk a lot around this idea that data visualization is a combination of disciplines. And it's become really present again in my life, returning to finance, storytelling, and financial. It sounds like we've all kind of returned to this space one way or another. And one of the newer learnings, I ended up in data for a while, data engineering teams, trying to support larger organizations, building data engineering, consulting projects, and things like that. And I've realized, especially recently in the types of users we have with the Preql platform, finance teams are data teams, and data is and all of this. So there's the design component for sure that's like could be a specialized discipline and something that I spend a lot of time in. But when you think about storytelling with data, that's everybody's job. And it's especially important when you're telling the story of a business. So what drew me to the space, I think, is that curiosity that ties us together here as well.
The conversation that we have all the time, and I think they're getting there, but it's taken a few years. It was amazing to me that sales and marketing really leaned into data and business analytics ahead of when finance did. But I think it's because e-commerce and all the data that was out there on the web, they had more data than we did early on, where we just had GL in finance. So that's not big data. When you've got, when you're doing a 3-year analysis and you have 3 marches, well, that's 3 data points. That's not big data. You can't use the same rules to it. It wasn't until you started finding correlations in other areas and other data points from the business that you could roll into finance to your forecasts and your metrics and what you're tracking, that then you started to be able to use some of these big data tools. So it's great with what you're doing with Preql now and what you've done before this and coming into finance and finance coming up to it. And so Paul and I are both kind of on a mission. And some people, there's still kind of an old school mentality around there of among even FP&A people that, we're not business analysts, we're FP&A, and it's to me, the skill sets have to combine. And having a data science component to FP&A makes you, in my mind, that much better.
Yeah, everyone's actually a data person at the end of the day, because everybody's got to care about the numbers. And maybe a little bit of a segue into this AI piece. I guess I'm the first person to use those terms today. Obviously, when all of us were in undergrad and graduate school, AI wasn't really something you were going to get into and study, even if finance was. And the applications of these automations that are available today, I think people say, even if you studied machine learning and AI in 2020 or 2021 or 2020, what's changed so dramatically with the technology would not necessarily be applicable. So being a general data person and someone that cares about numbers and information, I started also in the consulting side of our work with a lot of e-com and omni-channel and retail businesses. But the more data that companies generate, the more this becomes an issue. And there's these newer solutions. So yeah, excited to talk more about that.
Total softball for my next question. With Preql using AI to automate data cleaning and governance sounds really cool. And I know that this is where everybody's trying to get, but I'd love to hear more about how this technology helps solve some of the big challenges that finance teams are facing, making sure their data is accurate and consistent. And that's, I think everybody talks about generative AI right now. Obviously, that's what's catching everyone's attention. Which generative AI, non-deterministic. You're not always going to get the same answer. Whereas obviously with traditional machine learning, it is deterministic, and you can get the same answer. But I think a lot of people conflate the two. So I'd like to hear how you are using AI right now, and how that's helping finance teams deal with making sure their data is accurate and consistent around their financial reporting and forecasting.
Yeah, so I can share more about the current applications of the product. To answer immediately, FP&A teams spend a lot of time manually consolidating information. That's what I've learned. And our story of building Preql was always to help business teams better understand in the moment they need to make a decision, what information do they already have available, and how do you get that information to them in whatever format they need it to be. It could still be consumed in Excel, but let's make sure that the numbers they're seeing in Excel are real time, on demand, things like that. So AI and some of the data cleaning work, initially it was automated, and then obviously technology makes everything that much more possible, and we can distinguish between the generative side versus what's more kind of automation and closer to what's available today. What we saw with FP&A teams was a few problems. You're mentioning one of them, accuracy, and that's tied to the manual processes. So if you spend 70 hours a month or 2 weeks of every month just figuring out, okay, let's download all of the Excel CSVs from the data sources that we care about. Let's crunch the numbers together and try to understand where there's discrepancies, where we join different source systems and we need to create a new metric on top of that. And then we deliver those numbers. Yes, you're wasting 70 hours a month. What CFOs tend to care about isn't necessarily the resources wasted, but actually the accuracy. Then it lends itself to the next question. You've just manually done all this work. Joe or whoever it is on the team that's amazing at crunching those numbers. I learned this term recently. There could be this fat finger problem. The level of reliability and accuracy at that point, due to lack of automation and all of the manual work, then becomes a challenge. And then consequently, you're spending 75% of your time doing that work. And the remainder, that 25%, is answering questions, because FP&A teams, it's not just their responsibility to hand over a report. They also need to be able to justify every single line within that report. So you're essentially hiring entire functions to do something that could have otherwise been completely automated. And then that team and that brain power doesn't necessarily get replaced. They can then be strategic and think about the future and forecasting and, making real predictions. They become sort of a generative AI function, so to speak. So that's where Preql's seen a lot of value. And to be clear on how the product was structured, we built this to solve a data engineering problem. There's been a lot of innovation that's come into the space since Amazon Redshift 2012, making data cloud warehouses fast and cheap, right? So super easy to copy data now into a cloud storage warehouse. There's a ton of providers that do that. Once the data's there, what do you do next? Do you give it to the finance team in this raw, messy format? Do you, start downloading it out? Do you put it in a Tableau chart? People did that for a while and they still do. You take a Tableau report and you point it at all the messy raw production data. It's not giving you metrics or answers. So the only way to solve this challenge is really with data engineering manual kind of laborers. And so we set out to solve that problem and do so in a no-code way, in a way that didn't require knowledge of SQL, knowledge of structuring data, because there's such different skill sets. And so somehow that brought us full circle right to FP&A teams, because they essentially are the ones that need to deliver the reports. We try to help people with these three, just to end this thought by answering your question. We want to help teams reduce manual processes, increase accuracy, make sure that they have accurate data, and that process scales with them, doesn't necessarily require adding on, because these problems just grow over time.
I was going to say, I love where you guys are right now, because for years, I would tell people, if you really want to get ahead, you need to learn Python and SQL. But what we're seeing with generative AI and with drag and drop and low code, no code tools is, if you can do your job and you can say, I'm a domain expert in finance, I don't want to have to learn to be a machine learning engineer or a coder, then you can just really focus there. And so we talked about democratization of data for years, but with tools like this, it's democratization of data science, where you make it more available to.
Democratization of analytics and making it so. And my belief has always been like Preql sets out to solve this challenge, which is domain experts know best how they want their data structured and what they want to do with that data. And data engineers know best how they want to structure data and the coding side of things. So how do you close that gap? Because it's just this age-old problem where they go back and forth. And that's a whole new set of manual back and forth. With finance teams, they're not really getting that many data resources anyway a lot of the time. So again, that's been like, we've been trying to cut to the pain as a startup. Like we want to go as close to the painful part of the process as possible. But one step removed, larger organizations or more kind of tech forward companies, you find you have a data team and a business function.
Mm-hmm.
The business function should be thinking about the business. So what I'm trying to do with AI is not replace business functions in any way. It's let business domain experts and finance experts even focus on how to drive revenue for their business with existing data and eliminating all the parts of their work that an intern could do or, is simply just a manual process that takes up too many resources.
But I liked all my manual janky processes. It's job security where I worked at. No, it wouldn't invest anything. So we had to pretty much do everything manual. And I lived in Power Query. And we made a lot of progress, but it was not the most efficient way to do things. That's why I always called it. I go, it works, but it's janky. That's what I would always say.
Yeah. Because I know new manual processes will also develop. It's not like everything is going to be replaced. I tell people a lot when they ask questions, finance teams especially, like they're just setting out on their AI journey. Our idea was, Preql is the first step in this journey. Think about structuring your data because you can't do anything more with it. And I think where AI is today, it does a lot of small slivers really well, but it doesn't automate start to finish a process that a human could do for good reason. And I think there will always be exciting jobs. I spoke on a panel earlier I think it was last week, where someone who's building an accounting software was sharing that, accountants aren't the happiest people. Maybe you two would know even better. I've never done so many accounting. Like, how do you make their jobs even more interesting and actually apply that brain power, even though some of the manual work, as you're sharing, Paul, can be therapeutic?
Ever feel like your go-to-market teams and finance speak different languages? This misalignment is a breeding ground for failure, impairing the predictive power of forecasts and delaying decisions that drive efficient growth. It's not for lack of trying, but getting all the data in one place doesn't mean you've gotten everyone on the same page. Meet QFlow.ai, the strategic finance platform purpose-built to solve the toughest part of planning and analysis, B2B revenue. QFlow quickly integrates key data from your go-to-market stack and accounting platform, then handles all the data prep and normalization under the hood. It automatically assembles your go-to-market stacks, makes segmented scenario planning a breeze, and closes the planning loop. Create airtight alignment, improve decision latency, and ensure accountability across the teams.
Yeah, there are times when you just want to sit and I shouldn't say waste, spend mindless time working on a task, but not very often. There are occasionally times it's like, all right, I'll take that, just because you get to avoid, the happen to think a ton and just clean up some data. But no, constantly cleaning up data, not very fun. I've done more than my fair share of it. Like I said, Power Query became my best friend for a couple of years. I would have rather spent more time with the business, but I had to do both.
But you'll have new best friends that are AI softwares. I think that's kind of the part. It's like, how do you use whatever tool you have to be the best? And can you then, how does the whole business change if everybody is like super powered with,
Well, and I mean, the thing is, like you said, full processes. I mean, right now, AI, the agents aren't there yet to do full processes. And will they ever be, which parts will they do? Like you said, there's always going to be human interaction. If you want to call that manual, fine, whatever you want to call it. There's always going to be a human element to finance, to FP&A, to what we do, regardless of how much we're able to automate and change things with AI.
And it's, right now too, it's, as stuff is automated, it's like more automation leads to more data, which leads to need to automate more and more analytics. I mean, they're always joined at the hip, but then that skill set, if you're lowering the barriers there between having to learn a new skill and just being able to work with new data, I mean, that's a very strong value proposition. So I'm thinking about organizations trying to build a data-driven culture, and I work mostly with SMBs, and they know where they want to get. A lot of times they don't have enough data, but they don't have the in-house resources. Typically, certainly under the old paradigm, they don't have the in-house resources to build things from scratch. So it's very hard to move up that data maturity scale. So when you're working with businesses, trying to keep that balance between keeping things accessible for stakeholders who may not be super technical, like how do you strike that balance between a CFO who wants their team to be more data savvy, but they have the limited resources? I mean, how do you work in that space?
That's a really, really good question. And I love working with old school businesses, I call them, or legacy businesses, real businesses, because those are usually the folks where the opportunity is the greatest and the way that you can prioritize. Like if you've got a limited number of internal resources and your list of desires or new tools that you want to bring on or new solutions is super long, the best way is to find a couple of champions within that group that have an appetite for trialing some form of automation. And then they can kind of disseminate it around the organization. Because I don't really believe, I think what we're going to see with AI is these SMBs that would otherwise not have the chance to compete with counterparts that had just larger functions, because finance has been so manual. It's been so headcount forward, even though you all are the ones that actually, are trying to reduce the headcount and manage the headcount, which just makes it a little bit easier when our product a lot of the time is making it so that you don't need to hire a new function. You sit with that group and you prioritize, where are we leaving money on the table? Where do we already have data that could have been applied to change course? Forget forecasting 10 years in advance, forget, anything so generative and complex that we didn't use last year that we can apply today. And Preql is very versatile. The idea is centralization is number one. And what we're trying to do is create a single source of truth. Being data-driven is something companies have aspired to do since before I got into the space, more than 10, 15 years. And we've never really reached that moment. And we talked a bit about data visualization, but what BI tools have done really well is branded themselves and even some of the data softwares as, buy this solution and you will be data-driven. And then you find an SMB spending sometimes $1 million a year on a BI solution. And they're like, but the numbers aren't quite right and nobody's trusting these numbers. And why aren't we have charts, but we have a chart. And what I've learned designing a lot of charts is it doesn't matter how beautiful or how complex the visualization is if the numbers that are feeding into it aren't trusted. So that's the approach with Preql and why I set out to build a product that is focused on making the numbers match versus making the fanciest kind of visuals. And I think some of the smaller organizations where there's limited resources, it's even easier to prioritize. One mistake that cost us X million. I did a lot of that work back at WeWork as well, how we're leaving money on the table, which unfortunately couldn't save that whole company. But there was a lot of money being thrown around that you couldn't, because every dollar counts at that point, especially.
Not if you have community adjusted EBITDA. Wasn't that what they called it?
At first, that was exactly what they called it. Oh, wow.
I know that's what they called it. As I said, it's all this that we do, 80% of our business, that's not real money. That's focused on the parts that make us look really good.
And, it's impressive. It's impressive. And it's still a great product. I think companies can win or lose based on these financial reporting, a lot of this, how well they're able to structure existing data or manufacture existing. We can, move away from exactly what went on there. But the idea being data can be really powerful. Very few organizations use it well. There's the top FANG companies, which Preql wasn't built only to serve Google, or it's not the direction. They're able to kind of build internal processes, though they've been in our pipeline before, things like that. But it's more about how do we serve companies where they've never thought about automation, but now they're forced to, and AI has put it in their face. And what can we do? What's the lowest hanging fruit? And then the quick wins will lead to the larger more meaningful solution kind of development.
Makes a lot of sense. I can tell you're about to say something, Glenn.
Yeah, what do you think?
No. If we go back and we look at the word count, I'm probably going to have more words than anybody on the show, which I don't think that's what you're supposed to do as a co-host.
I can give you a run for your money. I'm like, we can compete. But if there's a specific story also that you're thinking about, I'm happy to address it as well, because I think they tend to have the same challenges a lot of the time. Data seems so unique. And as like having done consulting for many years and seeing the metrics that people care about, especially within similar verticals, your problems are not as isolated as you would think. Everybody's struggling to be data-driven. Everybody wants to measure generally the same thing. So I think that we will see a lot of exciting changes happening and more off-the-shelf things that a more junior employee could leverage, or a smaller team that the CFO will appreciate.
I definitely do think we are seeing, more of what you mentioned, with Preql and with others. I talk to companies all the time of trying to standardize, because yes, there's a ton of difference. I think the area what's most difficult is every company plans revenue and has some unique nuances. But in general, the data, the metrics we're looking at, there's a ton of similarities. There's a lot that can be done to standardize it. Just because 5% is unique doesn't mean you can't standardize the other 95%.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen, I'm really curious. I don't mean to turn the questions back on you both, but like, as folks that are now entering, you came before AI blew everything up. Like, I think what we've seen, and the reason I gravitate so much to this space, because I do also gravitate to these companies where there's just no infrastructure whatsoever when it comes to data analytics. How are you seeing this FP&A shift? Where are people adopting automation first? And where do you feel like your clients or people you talk to are the furthest behind?
Paul, I can probably speak to this one because I do. So SMB space. So let's say businesses. The most interesting, actually, I've got a client right now. They're 25 million in revenue. They're global. They're in 26 different countries. They have their chart of accounts is a nightmare. So all their revenue, they have a different revenue account for each client. So they have retainer clients that go over time. So they had, when I saw them, when we first started working with them, something like 900 accounts, it just some absurd amount of data that they couldn't, and they had a great Salesforce implementation. Their Salesforce, they did a really good job, but it wasn't connected to anything, and they were using QuickBooks Desktop at their corporate location, and all the subsidiaries were sending in their just spreadsheet. Basically, here's a spreadsheet of our GL for this month, and then somebody was having to key in all that. So this has been a long process. Like, eventually, maybe they get to an ERP, but before they're even to an ERP, it is about cleaning up the chart of accounts and identifying those KPIs, because they had all these different metrics and they're trying to bonus out employees, on their sort of the profit that they're responsible for. But when the chart of accounts is that messed up, you couldn't even get to it. So they didn't know, they couldn't properly allocate to what went to corporate and what went to the markets. And maybe somebody was working on the market, but the client was in a different market. So this is where businesses get, if you founder-led businesses, you get up, you're doing significant business, but you never had the resources to really think about data. You're just kind of going and going. And then where all their FP&A is happening at first by their tax people. And tax people, it's funny, small businesses always want their tax people to do FP&A for them. And that doesn't go anywhere in a tax person's brain. All they're trying to do is minimize your tax burden. And so it's a big ask. So that's a pretty big, this client that they let themselves get so big without cleaning it up. It's pretty amazing, but they had, kind of hockey stick growth to get there. So they're just, they're serving clients and not thinking about their back office. But most of them are really, it starts with, they've got to get their GL in order. And as soon as you get your GL in order and you can make sense of that data, well, then you can start bringing in external data and other departments. But being able, like in that company, tying Salesforce to their GL is going to be very significant, because then you've got visibility going back from prospect, all through the sales funnel, all the way through. So and everybody wants it to be this cool flip a switch and now we've got analytics, and there's so much, and you have to go through and you have to look at data flows and you have to look at processes. So building it out, that's why it's hard to sell to these groups sometimes, because they know what they want. And then when you walk them through and tell them what they've got to do to get there, they think, well, I don't want to commit 18 months to a data cleanup or whatever. Yeah.
Like you said, with any of your SMBs, it starts with dealing with the technical debt. They all want to use AI, but none of them, they have that, not technical, you could call it accounting debt if you want. Sometimes it's system, sometimes it's chart of accounts, sometimes it's the fact they've been doing a cash basis and you just can't build a proper budget off that as they're scaling. And so you have to start by fixing that and giving the attention they never did, because many of them didn't have any finance support and they were just concerned with the business. So in the SMB space, I'd say the biggest challenge is the data. And from every fractional CFO I talk to, often your first 6 months is cleaning things up. Then you actually get to the point where you can really budget, forecast, start to bring analytics. If you get to a little more mid-market, they've usually done a lot of that, but they could still, depending on how many acquisitions they've done, could still be quite a bit of a mess. So they're trying to figure out, how do I get to that next level where I can really start using the data? Typically with the SMB, you're just starting with, how do we get it to a clean place where I can budget, then start doing analytics. Mid-market, it's okay, what more do we need to advance our analytics, to get better and go deeper?
That is such a good, yeah, I really appreciate that, Paul, as a breakdown. And also, Glenn, the story, the idea that so many organizations have different definitions of revenue is kind of what brought us into the space to begin with. Like, I don't know if I can do it in 5 minutes, but if we could reduce the 18 months to 18 days, that's something that Preql's definitely been able to solve for. And we should talk more about it afterwards, because it is absolutely wild to have that many definitions of revenue, but be so revenue positive. Obviously they were focused on the right things. And the way we're describing it here, it's sort of like the video game. Like, you got to get through level 1, and then you can bring in more data and unlock more and more and more. And then I guess that, Paul, lends itself more to the sort of mid-sized businesses, which we found are very ripe for our accessibility features. So like the last piece of what we've done, and everybody's building in co-pilots and things like that to their products now, like AI agents. Preql was initially created as a no-code semantic layer. Okay, so a way that you can have semantic English language on top of multiple data sources. So our AI and conversational features are not querying your ERP and your messy GL files or whatever else it is. It's querying the semantic layer. And that's just made the conversational AI so much better. And that's where mid-sized businesses also get excited, because it's like, okay, well, we have all this data. Now everybody can it's the democratization.
Yep.
Can we really reach a place of self-service? I'm not totally sure. That's a different podcast, a different day, and BI and whatever. But
I think we could spend a couple hours on just that subject and not come probably to a clear conclusion. But yeah. What you define as true self-service as well, it's very subjective.
Exactly.
But I thought it was everything's truly no code and self-service, right? And everybody never in implementation. You just
all the numbers match. Yeah.
All your graphs look beautiful and you get wonderful insights. Isn't that what all the vendors sell you on? I always love that. Then you guys have to build the back end to that. It doesn't just flip a switch.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're looking for as well, like as a newer kid on the block in the space, is like, I like working with the older school legacy brands and trying to get them further ahead, because it's not like there are so many solutions that claim they do the same thing. So either you've been burned by one and you're like migrating off and you're saying, they promised me they'd do all these things and they didn't, or there's no adoption yet. So I'm really curious to see how these brands, how these organizations start thinking, knowing that they're a little bit more skeptical, at least, of, you can be data-driven in an instant because you've worked in enough places where you've had X, Y, and Z tool and it didn't change the bottom line. And then the last thing I'll say is my background and the work that I've done with the consulting space, but also like on education, I think it is a cultural thing as well. Like, you do need people to be excited and interested, and it's an era right now where people are learning and listening to podcasts to understand, because no one knows what to expect with AI. So trying to seize that opportunity as a way to bring in advocates, those like the stewards, the ambassadors that we're talking about in these SMB organizations, one person that's like, yes, I will learn and then teach others is really critical. And we look for that in our champions when like we're not just trying to sell product through, we want to transform organizations and make sure that everybody's on board. So I think that, yeah, and it doesn't matter how long you've been in the space to be excited about the future of AI. It's not just like newer generation.
Oh, and if you want to keep customers, you want them to be using the tool. You have to have those champions. Otherwise, they're just going to churn.
Exactly.
It's a question of when, not if. If they don't have people that really believe in the product and that you're delivering value. So there's both sides of that. You love to see them transform their business. You also know if you want them to really use the tool and get advantage of it, you kind of have to do that, right? So it's kind of that there's both those benefits. I think what we're going to move on to, so we have a fun where we ask a couple get to know you questions.
Cool.
How it works in this case is I fed your LinkedIn, an article you did, the questions I had, all into ChatGPT. Played with a little bit. I didn't like the first one because it was basically like you're supposed to get to know you questions, and it came up with all the questions we'd ask for the podcast. So I changed it a little bit, and it came up with 25 questions. I'll go first, and then Glenn will go. So you get two options. You can pick a number between 1 and 25, or the random number generator can pick a number for you, and that's the question class.
Cool. I have a number.
All right, what number?
I want 17.
All right, 17. And this was all by ChatGPT this time. So we've used different tools. All right. Who inspires you most in the tech or data world and why?
That is such a good question. I'm going to give a personal answer, but I work every day with Leah Weiss, my co-founder. And I think that you can look out into the tech world and there's a lot of people doing exciting things. I'm going to say two things. She's personal to me in the sense that we partner so frequently in thinking about the challenges everybody faces and then looking outwards and seeing, what's new and what's being done by everybody else. I think the people that are most inspiring when it comes to what we're seeing in the data space, I'll give another answer that's also somebody I've been following on LinkedIn. You need to stay grounded with what the real challenges are and not just follow the trends. And Leah's amazing at that and always going back to like, what is the core problem? And making sure that, we are never driving too far ahead when it comes to what's going on with AI. There's also a guy who I've been following recently who's been talking a lot about kind of how FP&A teams, and this is new to us because FP&A teams, we didn't always know. His name is Walter Bourne.
Walter Bourne. I know him well.
I'd love to meet him. His post right now.
Yeah, if you want to meet, I could facilitate a conversation.
Like answer. Now I've dropped his name. Would love to meet Walter. I think he's posting really insightful things and empowering things. FP&A teams deserve to be empowered. And I think that is the most exciting thing that I've discovered in the space.
Got it. Yeah, actually, I had a message from him this morning. We're trying to get him on the podcast. Funny enough.
Great. Get him. I would love to hear his perspective.
Definitely. I'll connect you with him. All right, Glenn, your turn to ask one.
So Paul did a nice job with this. So normally I'll go and just pick what we bounce back and forth between the different LLMs and pick these, and usually just to make fun of Gemini. I keep hearing Gemini is going to get better, but I hadn't seen it yet. But Paul's got a good list here. And normally, so we'd take a different approach. He does the number of the random generator, and I normally, because I have the list, I just say, give me a random one here. But I think, so I've got that, and I actually put it in to pick a random one. So I'm going to give you the option of, we can go with what ChatGPT picks, or we can go with what I pick.
Cool. This is a fun podcast, guys. I'm
Which one do you want? ChatGPT or do you want his?
You pick. We'll do GPT for today.
Okay. So I'll tell you, I actually liked what ChatGPT gives.
You're in charge.
So let's go with the quick answer for that, and then I'll ask mine. So ChatGPT picked, if your life had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh my God. That is really funny. There's a fight song. This is my fight song that I've been listening to a lot as a founder, and just like it was a Hillary Clinton song, but I don't want to get political. But just like being able to pivoting, moving forward, making sure that you can just bat away the stuff that isn't working and always like focusing on the vision and the goal, because things are changing around us all the time and you just have to go with what's happening. These are fun.
Got it. So we got.
And I was going to ask mine because I was curious on this one.
What's yours? What are your guys' theme songs?
Mine's "I Can't Get Up" by James Brown.
What's my theme?
That actually kicks in on long runs. That's my mantra that goes in my.
We'll have a theme song. I'm gonna have to think about that one.
Cool.
My question was going to be, you started in graphic design. You mentioned painting. Do you still go back and, as a hobby, do you still pursue art at all as an escape or anything? Do you stay involved with that?
Yeah, I won't like swivel my camera around and show you paintings in my home today because I am home. But I don't paint as much as I'd like to. I have all the materials for it, and I do. I have it in the house. I think like it's kind of connected to this journey as a founder where you need to step away and kind of return to your hobbies or whatever else it is. So yeah, I still paint. And I think that starting my career by focusing on like harnessing this like creativity skill and this idea that like you start with a blank canvas and then you build something really did kind of lay the groundwork for the later entrepreneurship and serial entrepreneurship. Like this isn't the last company I'm going to found. And I've now found my way into this amazing community of FP&A people, but what's the next community? I think, Paul, you mentioned you did study entrepreneurship and you've done so many things since then. So yes, I still paint. I wish I painted more. And I think everybody should be stepping aside and like thinking about doing things just beyond, and especially with the screens and everything today. So.
All right, I got to start painting, it sounds like.
Yeah, we should do a painting class. We could do, that's a fun offsite.
That could be an interesting podcast. We could, video one. We could each be doing our vision, instruct us with.
I'm here for you guys to do this stuff.
Thank you for joining us. It's been a real pleasure having you, Gabi. We've had a lot of fun. If we had more time, we could definitely go deeper, I'm sure, and talk probably the rest of the day. But, we're getting close to the holiday, and I'm sure we all want to wrap up work so we can spend time with family. So thank you so much for joining us. Really enjoyed chatting with you today.
Likewise.
Thanks, Gabi.
Thanks for listening to the Future Finance Show, and thanks to our sponsor, QFlow.ai. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. And may your robot overlords be with you.